if they were to seize Greenland, it would be the end of NATO. Because essentially what you would have would be a weird situation where this Article 5 of NATO's charter, an attack on one is an attack on all, would be an attack by one on another NATO member, which would be an attack on all.
Yeah.
And, you know, we are not going to go to the war with the United States over it, but you could no longer have an organization called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Now, let us catch up on the wider picture, and welcome to the programme Tim Marshall, who's a former foreign correspondent and the author of Prisoners of Geography. Hello to you, Tim. What are your thoughts, first of all, on this shadowing of the shadow vessel?
I believe it was initially flagged with a Guyanese flag, as is quite normal, like lots of ships fly under a Panamanian or Guyanese flag. So again, painting the Russian flag on the side of it doesn't really make it Russian. So where is it? And this is interesting as well. And actually, I think this is related to another of today's major topics. It's up in somewhere called the GI-UK gap, the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap. That is the sea lanes between those three land areas. And this is a traditional area of tension between Russia and NATO. So the planes that the Americans sent were flown out of Mildenhall. This is a P-8, one of their specialist planes. And the reason I say this is connected to other stories is that if you look at the statement that's come out of the European leaders today about America's designs, or Trump's designs, on Greenland, it starts with the words Arctic security. It's critical for transatlantic security. Yeah. So the point I'm making is that the Europeans will be reminding the Americans of just how useful it is to them to have these bases, such as Mildenhall, Lakenheath, the listening station at Fylingdales, Ramstein, the new base they're building in Romania, the ports they have, etc., etc., etc. Because if they don't have those bases, their power projection is limited. So that's why I'm sort of perhaps tangentially linking these two things together. Now, what will happen? I have no idea. It depends how far away they are from a coastline, whether a Special Forces helicopter could go in and drop troops. They may have the technology to send fast boats with climbing equipment on them. I suspect if they want to do it, the Americans, they'll do it. They would probably prefer to do it in international waters, not in the waters of a sovereign state like Ireland, a non-NATO member. They certainly wouldn't want to do it in Russian waters. So if they're going to do it, they need to do it in the next couple of days.
Right, really, really interesting. This does then bear on the strategic game that's going on about America's ambitions to have Greenland, and the argument against doing that, the warnings that have come a little earlier this afternoon from European leaders against doing that, saying that Greenland belongs to the Greenlanders and to its sovereign, as it were, state, which is Denmark. And of course, in the background, I say the background, very much in the foreground, you've got the American administration reasserting its claim to want to possess Greenland. I mean, just, not very long ago, just hours ago, with a very powerful Deputy Chief of Staff at Donald Trump's White House, Stephen Miller, he was giving an interview, and he was asserting that no one would or could stand in America's way if they chose to take Greenland.
It has been the formal position of the U.S. government since the beginning of this administration, frankly, going back into the previous Trump administration, that Greenland should be part of the United States. The president has been very clear about that. That is the formal position of the U.S. government.
Right, but can you say that military action against Greenland is off the table?
It wouldn't be military action against Greenland. The Greenland has a population of 30,000 people, Jake. The United States should have Greenland as part of the United States. There's no need to even think or talk about this in the context that you're asking of a military operation. Nobody's going to fight the United States.
So, I mean, no backing away on the part of that senior Trump advisor from Donald Trump's wish to possess Greenland, or belief that they can make that happen. And it's getting more and more tense.
They can make it happen if they choose to, but that's why linked what's going on with this tanker because this is actually a demonstration of how useful it is for the Americans to have bases in Europe. Now, without question, they want to draw down, but they don't want to leave completely. I'll give you another example. Africa Command, oddly enough, is based in Germany. The Americans' Africa Command and its ability to operate in the Sahel region and in parts of Africa is actually based in Germany. Now, I think the Danish Prime Minister, Mrs. Frederiksen, is absolutely correct when she says if they were to seize Greenland, it would be the end of NATO. Because essentially what you would have would be a weird situation where this Article 5 of NATO's charter, an attack on one is an attack on all, would be an attack by one on another NATO member, which would be an attack on all.
Yeah.
And we are not going to go to the war with the United States over it, but you could no longer have an organization called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization because it would just be a nonsense. At which point, John, each individual nation of the 27 would have to then decide, could it really be hosting American bases given those circumstances? Now, some would and some wouldn't. So seizing Greenland would strengthen the United States. It is true there are minerals there that they want for the 21st century. They only have one base, Pituffik, which used to be known as Thule. It is the shortest route for Russian submarines underneath the ice pack. It is the shortest route for Russian missiles over Greenland towards North America. And they could build extra bases there. But it would fundamentally weaken them in other aspects. So that's why this statement came out of the EU. It's about 5 paragraphs long. I've subbed it down to a couple of sentences because these are the key bits. It starts with Arctic security critical for security, but then says Denmark part of NATO. And then this is the tough bit. I mean, this is actually quite hard language, including from the British Prime Minister. These are universal principles and we will not stop defending them. It's a line in the sand.
Yes.
If the Americans did do this, it will break NATO, and they're warning the Americans it would do that and that they would be diminished inside the States. Last bit, John, I remember saying this to you a couple of times last year. It is worth remembering that it's not nuts to want Greenland. It doesn't stop you from looking like a gangster if you take it, but Truman tried to buy it in the 1950s. The Americans have been after this for a very long time.
Yeah. It's just really great to get your take. I mean, stay with us if you can, Tim. I want to get the view now of Christopher Hernandez-Roy. He is Deputy Director for the Americas Programme at the Centre for Strategic International Studies. Welcome to you, Christopher.
Hi, good afternoon from New York. Good morning still, I guess, from the U.S.
It's great to have you on the show. You study these matters. You follow American policy and motives in this area, and certainly Greenland counts as part of America's sphere, or hoped for sphere, of power and influence. Do you take seriously, Christopher, the idea that America might take Greenland against the wishes of Greenland and of Denmark, first of all?
Well, as your previous speaker pointed out, there are some real strategic national security implications for the U.S. wanting Greenland.
Yes.
beyond the economic potential of the largest island on Earth, which is reputed to be rich in critical minerals, including rare earth elements, which are critical for the defense industrial base and for
Yes.
The rearmament of the United States and frankly Europe for that matter as well. But for a number of reasons, I think it is a bridge too far.
Is this in your opinion or the White House's thinking?
Well, what I said a minute ago was clearly in the White House's thinking and stretching back to the previous administration. In fact,
Yes.
has been top of mind in various administrations.
Yeah.
And frankly, an interesting historical anecdote. In fact, Canada itself wanted to purchase Greenland at the beginning of the 20th century.
But understanding that, Christopher, if I may, the desire to possess Greenland is now well understood. Do you consider the Trump administration might actively move to take it?
I think that would be a bridge too far. The international ramifications would be severe. It would certainly weaken the United States military posture.
And do you believe President Trump would back away from this ambition for that reason, for fear of the likely consequences, the rupture of relationships with key allies in NATO and Europe.
In NATO and Europe, and certainly there would be very strong implications for the United States' relationship with Canada, which borders Greenland and is an Arctic power in its own right, or an Arctic country in its own right.
So you don't take the threat seriously.
The various negatives definitely outweigh whatever strategic benefits the United States would gain from possessing Greenland, because it already has unfettered access to its military base in the high north in Greenland.
And can do deals
sure
on resources as well. But I mean, those are arguments, good arguments against any suggestion of trying to seize Greenland. But my question to you was, do you believe, despite those arguments, despite the strategic disadvantages, the rupture in relations, the fact that you can achieve much the same thing by other means, despite all of that, do you consider that Stephen Miller, the president's senior aide, and the president himself are not to be taken seriously? Do you think they would back away from this stuff?
I do not think that the United States is going to take Greenland militarily.
Okay.
I think it will use other measures, including perhaps economic coercion, to have greater control over the island, but not sovereign control of Greenland.
And when you say economic coercion, do you mean under high tariffs, the classic weapon now, that tariffs against, say, Denmark as the sovereign body?
The administration has shown itself willing to use tariffs to achieve a whole range of policy objectives that have nothing to do with trade and have everything to do with security. Look at the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, for instance, to stop fentanyl and migration.
That would still mean, Christopher, that would still mean a rupture with European partners, wouldn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
And Tim, so Christopher seems to think we have the threats now pretty explicit from the White House, but in the end they would probably not go through with it. You feel possibly differently.
No, I agree with Christopher, and I agree with him when he talks about this sort of hybrid manner in which the Trump administration goes about its foreign policy. It often uses one tool, which you think it might be entirely economic, but it's actually about something wider, including a philosophy of the 21st century. So I agree. I mean, you can never rule it out. Stephen Miller is the hawk's hawk, and just because he says it, it doesn't mean that Trump would do it. And also, a couple of quick things. One, this is an aside. Denmark agreed last year basing rights for the Americans in 3 different bases in Denmark. Obviously, they would have to go, but they could deal with that. Yeah. But the other bases are much more important. But also, I mean, who does he listen to? Well, Erdogan, because Turkey, which was slipping out of NATO, is kind of solidified back into it. Erdogan wouldn't want NATO at the moment to break up, and he would probably listen to it. He does appear to listen to PM Starmer, who would make this much more forcibly, this argument, than any condemnation about Venezuela. And you can see now, both because of Ukraine and because of this issue, why PM Starmer and most of the other European leaders have really been held themselves on the leash about Venezuela. And he would listen also to Tusk from Poland, because the Poles and the Americans, I think, are almost closer than sometimes than the British and the Americans are. So I just think there would be enough people that he actually listens to, including in his own administration, that they wouldn't go that far. But the caveat is, we are dealing with Trump.
Well, indeed, we are. Last question to you, Christopher, and briefly, if I may, we're always very short of time. Later on, we're going to be watching what's happened in Paris at the meeting of the so-called Coalition of the Willing. Those leaders prepare to combine together to put together a multinational force to supervise a Ukraine ceasefire when one comes. Do you believe those leaders, those European leaders and Ukraine, can expect very much by way of support from America at these talks and subsequently of that coalition of the willing, that multinational force? So far, America has not been over-enthusiastic. How do you think that will play out, Christopher?
I think the Trump administration is absolutely driven by the notion that Europeans should be much more responsible for European security, and that the greatest land war in Europe since World War II is something that the Europeans need to step up to address, and that coalition of the willing, the Americans will be there. They'll be behind the scenes, but they'll expect the Europeans, along with the other North American ally, Canada, to play a greater role in the settlement of
Yes.
any European, any Ukrainian peace with.
Okay, well, maybe
with
we'll
Russia.
find out later on what limited role America might be prepared to play in that coalition of the willing multinational force. Christopher Hernandez-Roy, thank you so much for joining us. And Tim Marshall, very grateful to you too, Tim.